Tamburlaine the Great is a monster hit, a big theatrical success that people are talking about for years afterwards. People are quoting it. People use the name Tamburlaine as shorthand. Its success also gets Marlowe in trouble. There's a reference shortly before his death to the atheist Tamburlaine. Another writer, Robert Greene, talks about that atheist Tamburlaine. This dovetails, unfortunately, with the accusation of atheism against Marlowe. And very shortly before Marlowe's death, the anonymous spokesperson for an angry anti-immigrant mob, puts up an elaborate death threat against refugees living in London and signs it Tamburlaine. Not good. Not good, even a little bit. Pardon me. Just being involved in black magic, as we learned from Faustus, doesn't make you smart. Meet my familiar, who is not clever, but who is about to mess up the camera setup. Don't do that. Don't do that, buddy. So, this play is the only play published in Marlowe's lifetime without his name, because maybe he didn't want his name on it, who knows, but in case, maybe simply the acting company who does have their name on it doesn't want it. Actually, at a moment before a lot of plays from the public playhouses, a lot of commercial plays get published at all. There are very, very few published at all in Marlowe's lifetime. The gates open up for unrelated reasons just after he dies, so he missed out on that too, and the rest of the 90s and the 17th century. It's published by Richard Jones, who tells us in a preface that he cut out some baser matter. We generally mean, apparently, there were clown scenes. Some people will stretch and say, well, the clown scenes maybe weren't by Marlowe. Like, no, he just cut out clown scenes because he cut out the clown scenes. Though there is some solid comedy here in the tragedy of Tamburlaine, the world conqueror, like with our comical idiot Emperor of Persia Mycetes, who we begin with, right? Who's a narcissist of a much less successful type than Tamburlaine himself. This play ushers in an entire genre of the so-called drum and trumpet military epics with conquering military heroes from the East, from the Muslim world especially. We are entirely within the Muslim world. Tamburlaine is not a good guy necessarily, but he is a hero, if at least to some. The person who signed Tamburlaine to the death threat clearly considered Tamburlaine a hero and a role model. He's a hero to some people. People emulate him. Shakespeare's character Ensign Pistol in Henry IV Part 2 is quoting Tamburlaine and a bunch of other Tamburlaine-like plays, getting off on the idea of being a Muslim conqueror. This entire play happens within the Muslim world. There are questions, especially in part 2, of Tamburlaine's atheism. It's very clear to us that neither Marlowe nor the actors nor the audience have any idea what Islam actually teaches. You can see the Muslims in this play, the alleged Muslims, are worshiping Muhammad as a god. One thing everybody agrees on, Muhammad himself, not a god, never said he was. Nobody actually ever said he was. So that's very strange. What is the explanation for that? English ignorance. They just didn't know and didn't bother to find out. This is a huge, this is also extremely compelling. Now, it's a complicated kind of play in that this character wins and wins and wins. His character arc, especially in part 1, this doesn't seem to be an arc. It seems to be a line. He goes up. He goes up. Every time you think this is going to stop him, this is the come. I often find myself expecting to come down, even though I know how this goes, and then it just doesn't happen. He keeps winning and winning and winning. I would point out it is so early in the stage tradition that there are actually no fights on the stage. None of the battles are staged. You keep seeing a stage direction as they enter to the battle and they exit. A bunch of actors wander across stage dressed for combat, go off stage. We hear a bunch of trumpets, maybe some other sound effects, but mostly trumpets. And Then they march back on, and one of group has won and another group has lost. And then we find out it's mostly talking. In fact, it's all talking. Tamburlaine is an incredibly physical, incredibly literal, even simple minded conqueror, but he is entirely about language. He is about the, and this play is about the ecstasy of language. Here you can really see Marlowe's iambic pentameter, mighty line, really taking off. He likes these long, exotic to him words, words of three, four, five syllables, right? Do not drop the syllables out of people's names. Xenocrate, Theridamas, Techeles, Usam Kasani, right? Usam Kasani, his name is half an iambic pentameter line right there. It's five syllables already. You need to have a certain amount of craft to get these super long words into your iambic pentameter line without cramping your style. Marlowe is surfing the kind of sound qualities and the place names. He's got an atlas, Artelius's atlas. He's using that to create this this sense of exotic and epic sweep and scope. It's a trick Milton would use later. I think maybe using the same atlas to pick up to pick up the sounds of the language, the ecstasy of just winning. Now, Tamberlaine is a complicated character, and for the first five acts we spend with him, he's just winning and winning and winning. We can psychologize him. We can say this is a story of a kind of person with a personality disorder, an antisocial personality, and his enablers, as he rants at length about how wonderful he is and how he will win all the time and everybody else is beneath him, um, and attracts all attention to himself. This maybe seems familiar to us because he seems to be, maybe he has narcissistic personality disorder, a psychiatric idea that did not exist in Marlowe's time, but um, we might we might go with that. There is some kind of sense of him as a kind of action hero or superhero in for whom the audience identifies and kind of has their kind of shares the excitement of identification with him. Um, Maybe notice that they're totally okay identifying with a Muslim conqueror because it's all very far away. On the one hand, the Turk, etc., is the big bad, a fear figure, but not nearly as frightening or as kind of hated as the much closer Christian religious enemies of Elizabethan Protestants. Um, and in some ways, also, they're kind of grooving on this exoticism of like the idea of being. And there's a lot of Orientalism in here. This is a kind of imperials. They are reimagining the Near East in their own terms, but they're grooving on it. They are fantasizing about a Muslim Superman action hero who they would like to be. Um, there be a sense, but because he has no Christian, that he's not a Christian, he therefore has no rules, no. He seems to have no conscience. He seems extremely cruel, and he allows people to kind of imaginatively fantasize about not having any rules applied to them and that kind of thing. So there's a kind of a wish fulfillment element that is we know we have a historical document that in at least one case this play really appealed to people who had fantasies of horrific violence towards their totally peaceful, also Protestant neighbors. There is from the 20th century the idea of Tamberlaine and all of Marlowe's major dramatic heroes as what Harry Levin called overreachers. Harry Levin's book from the 1950s, The Overreacher, in which case he imagines all of the kind of most famous canonical Marlowe heroes as people who are in a kind of reaching beyond the bounds of what's allowed to humanity. And there's a kind of striving there that critics have identified with the Renaissance itself, with wanting to get out of the Middle Ages, wanting to get to like what are the possibilities of human life? What can we cross taboos? Can we just what can we do? So there, Faustus and Tamburlaine become people who are trying to get beyond morality, or, in a kind of proto-Nietzschean way. There's also the sense in 16th century, pardon me, in English religious Christian doctrine, there are ideas about people who are selected by God even though they are unknown to God. That Tamburlaine is the hammer of God sent to punish other people God wants punished. That doesn't mean he's good. It means God. There is a Christian religious way to read Tamburlaine as someone selected by God to go punish people God wants punished as the scourge of God. He doesn't have to be a believer himself. He's not. Um, for this to be possible, this is an idea older than Christianity itself. It goes back, at the very least, to the book of Isaiah, if not before, in which Isaiah is like, look at the emperor of Persia. He doesn't know about God, but God has chosen him to do these things to do our enemies and set us free, to punish Israel's enemies and help Israel. He's chosen by God. He just doesn't know that. That's strange logic. In part two, you'll see more of why that is. Is this a tragedy? Can it be a tragedy if he always wins? Well, the flippant answer is it's a tragedy for everyone whose name isn't Tamburlaine, right? It's tough to be Bajazeth. It's not even great to be Xenocraty. I would argue, and this is not an argument so this is me arguing. This is not a write-up of the criticism. One of the things that marks this as a tragedy is his rigidity, his inability to be flexible. So we have this crazy thing where he shows up and he does his kind of 3-day, 3-color pattern. First day, white tents, white outfit, surrender now, everything's great. Day 2, red ensemble, red tents, surrender now, and I'll only kill the men of military age. Day 3, black, I'm going to kill everybody. And then, even when Xenocrates asks him, he refuses or presents himself even to himself as unable to change himself. That being Tamburlaine locks him into these particular behaviors and he cannot compromise, he cannot backtrack. He has to commit these atrocities. Yeah, by the way, that's our hero, or as we usefully say in the English department, our protagonist, committing terrible atrocities, killing innocent civilians, women, children, totally defenseless people, old people. A murderer, a war criminal. Sure, this is the war criminal as hero. You thought last week was tough with the guy who sold his soul to the devil. Tamburlaine doesn't even think he has a soul, and he kind of is the devil. Is there beauty here? Yeah, the beauty is in the language. The beauty is in the ringing phrases to ride in triumph through Persepolis. The working words of this kind of incredible galloping, percussive, driving rhythm that Marlowe can bend around and do all kinds of magical things with. Our criticism this week will actually be about the verse itself, so it won't just be me talking about versification. Okay, talk to you soon. Next week, part 2, more crazy.